So I wanted to cover 1,500 shares of the 3,000 I had, but instead I end up buying 15,000 shares and gave everything back. Why the fuck do I keep doing this? Welcome to another week of live trading. The first trade I take for the week was this SLS. This wasn't my favorite watch for the open, but it was one of my top watches. This thing has been on a tear these past few weeks, and today's gap ended that rally on the daily and set up a 1-minute doji bar on the intraday. So I decided to play the low high of that bar as a short. A bit aggressive for sure, since it was gapping a decent amount, but like that it just cleared the hourly 200, and using the big stop, let's see if we can get some follow through to the downside. I got filled a little shy of how much I wanted, so I was a tiny bit undersized on the trigger, but it was off to a decent start until out of nowhere it decided to pop hard against me. My stop was over the high of the day, so couldn't do much but to let it play out and hope it holds. But usually a pop like that to start a reversal is not a good sign. But thankfully it triggered a sell setup on the 1, came back in and started basing at the low for a breakdown. So I decided to add the remaining shares I didn't get filled, plus a little extra sprinkles of shares on top on the breakdown, and lowered my stop to that 15-minute 123. It took some time to get going, but as it started to accelerate into my target, I decided to trail most of it. And usually I like to keep a piece, but decided to take the rest of it since it was at support and I didn't really see a second target in sight. And good exit because it ended up being the bottom for the day. So not really the best reward to risk play since I used a big stop, but it was still my best trade for the day and wasn't much else to do. There was just this MAPS. I jumped in as it was dropping, just as a quick scalp short, just made a tiny bit, but other than that, that was the day. Then on Tuesday, I went after POW, which gapped down on earnings. I did the 123 setup off the 2-minute and only got filled half the position. That's the problem with these shorts. If it's on an uptick, it's hard to get filled sometimes. But nice continuation bar and follow through to the downside. Just an easy ride down the hill for this one. And when it got over 2 Rs, I decided to trail half to the offer. Sucks that I was only half sized, but whatever. Let's take half of what I got filled. So I wanted to cover 1,500 shares of the 3,000 I had, but instead I end up buying 15,000 shares and gave everything back. Why the fuck do I keep doing this? So here's what happened. I use Thinkorswim, and what they have is something called an active ladder window where I execute my trades with hotkeys. And they have this quantity box where you set the quantity of shares you want to buy or sell. And I meant to punch in 1,500, but I guess in the heat of the moment, I added another 0 and hit buy. So that put me long 13,500 shares in a stock that was dropping, and it took a few seconds before I realized what happened and had no choice but to flatten my position and take the loss. Now, the problem with Thinkorswim is that it only has buy and sell buttons. So if I want to short, I hit sell, and if I want to cover, I hit buy. Whereas on a platform like E-Trade, buying and shorting have their own dedicated executions. So on E-Trade, I would hit short to short, not sell, and then hit cover to exit the position, not buy, like on Thinkorswim. So what this does is if I were in the same situation and I try to cover 15,000 shares instead of the 1,500, it would reject the order because I only have 3,000 shares total. So a message would pop up and say, you don't even have that many shares to cover, and nothing would happen. So this happens more often than I care to admit, and normally I don't get frustrated like this, but these days there's just very little opportunity, so if I miss it or mess it up, it's hard to get these kind of opportunities back. Just like how on Monday, the only thing was that SLS for me, and I felt this POW may be the only one for today. So it's just not the best time to be making these kind of mistakes, if ever. So the POW powed me between my legs on that dumb move. Let's move on. Then I saw the VLTA dropped a good amount today and just caught some of that move on the breakdown for a quick scalp. And later into the afternoon session, I shorted the GoEV. This got a big rally the other day and was on my carryover list. It started to come in off the rounding top on the 15. And one thing I didn't like about it was that it was into the rising 20 on the hourly, but I decided to take the ride to see how far it can drop. And surprisingly, it actually went a decent amount, which ended up making over 2 Rs for me. So it was nice to be able to catch something to make up for that POW, and I called it a day. Wednesday was pretty quiet overall. DNA had a big reversal yesterday and got back down today into the lows, so I decided to short it off the sell setup, but it ended up not coming in much since it was probably stuck at some support. So that made just a little bit. Then BKD was down a good amount today and the rally got rejected. So I shorted it under the lows for a quick scalp and that was it. So couldn't really catch any of the big moves today or get anything going and wasn't a whole lot to watch. Thursday had a few interesting gaps. First I went after ARDX. Daily looked like the uptrend was over, but gapped up to new highs today, so was watching it for higher, but instead it was getting sold off. I've noticed a lot of these low price stocks that gap a good amount have been coming in, so I decided to try it short under the lows, because it did look like it could come in and fill the gap. But it ended up popping against me and I had to take the partial loss right at the open. Then remember the DNA from yesterday, which looked weak but didn't really go? Well, it looked like it wanted to go again today, so I shorted it on the breakdown under the 1 minute. I decided to short this one on E-Trade since I saw that it was easier to get filled on. And this time, I do get a nice drop, probably because we're clearing that support area we were stuck at yesterday and covered the whole thing on the flip. I think that was my best trade of the week as it made over 4 Rs for me. And nothing else really set up, pretty much died down into the afternoon, and that was it. Then Friday, right at the open, I liked the Iova short, tried it under the 1 minute, but this thing was impossible to get filled on. I even kept chasing it on the way down and barely got filled. This probably had the potential to be the play of the week, but just couldn't get filled and it was gone. I mean, I really hate this uptick rule. Then I saw the boar setting up, I think reported earnings, gapped down trying to break the uptrend and trapping some of the buyers from yesterday. I decided to short it off the 1 minute breakdown. Wasn't the cleanest, but looked lower. The only thing was at the time the market was looking higher, so it was bad timing with the market, but decided to give it a shot. And what a bad decision that was, because it triggered me in and then jetpacked its way up to my stop, so ended up taking a full stop on that play. Then the next trade was ISEE. Today's gap reversed the recent move on the daily, retaking the 20 and was basing for a breakout on the 5. I undersized it since it was spready, and it got to my first target, which was the prior highs, so decided to take half under the 5 minute bar, but took some nasty slippage. Then after the bounce off the pullback, triggering another buy setup on the 5, I decided to raise my stop on the back half to that pivot, which ended up being my break-even point. Unfortunately, that buy setup ended up failing and took me out, so didn't make much because of the bad fill on the front half and back half. Then I reshorted the boar on the sell setup, but this time just for a quick scalp. Wasn't planning to hold since it seemed to be moving with the market, but followed through a little bit and was able to recover off the initial loss, and that was it. Like I said, not a lot of opportunities lately, just trying my best to catch what I can and stay out of trouble. So that was the week. It sucks that the market has been slow, but also glad to still be able to make some money. So that's going to do it. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like button before taking off. As always, I appreciate you for being here and hope to see you on the next one. Peace.